Hi, Eric. Hi, Karen.
Hi, Pat.
It's so nice to be here in your house. It's always so it's such an oasis of calm every time we come here.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've done such a beautiful job
Thank
in
you.
decorating it and laying it out. And it always feels like peace when we walk in the door
Thank you. Ooh,
here. So
thank you. That means a lot.
yeah. So we wanted to talk to we're talking to a lot of what we feel are influential and important thinkers in terms of consciousness and society and our role as searchers.
Love that.
Yeah. So one of the things that I was so interested, because Carrie and I were talking about questions to ask you, and one of them that I was so interested is I think I sent you the question, which is that I'd love to hear about your spiritual journey. From like when you were a little kid and you first. I'd like to just hear about your journey, where it took you, and up until today. This morning.
Oh gosh, that's covering a lot of ground. But
I know. Right?
I made a few notes based on your questions.
Good.
So I loved your question of how early.
Yeah.
Because I have to start with my mother.
Oh.
She was a Southern Baptist, very deeply religious, praying woman, and she had been married before she married my dad, and had 2 sons. And her youngest son, Monty, was 10 years old when I was born. And he died of polio before I was a year old. So I was about 6 months old, and the story that's told in the family is that my mother rocked me and grieved him. And that, I think, was my introduction to spirituality. Although I was 10 myself before I ever knew I had a brother that had died. She kept it a secret. She never spoke of it. And I found his picture, which was one they took in the old days of him in the casket, in her bottom drawer when I was getting a scarf for her out of that drawer. And that opened the conversation. But we had that one conversation and then never again until years and years later.
How did she explain it to you?
She just said that he got very sick and he died within like 24, 48 hours. He had lockjaw with it, and they couldn't, those days, they couldn't do anything. And her grief was kept under wraps. My mother was an extremely optimistic human being, and she was always creating. She was an artist, and she was always creating, and so she didn't like to talk about sad things or difficult things. And so I was never encouraged to explore that, but it must have been in my bones, because that early experience. And then, when I was young, we had a house. We lived many places. We moved every 2 years because my dad was rising up in the Weather Bureau, and that's how you did it.
Right.
You were, if you were a severe weather forecaster, you went to where the weather was severe, whether it was snow or tornadoes or whatever. And so we moved all the time, and so we lived in a house in Ohio with a huge backyard. And my family, once my sister was born, she was younger than me, the 3 of them all liked to fight with one another, and I didn't want to fight. And so I would go in the woods, and to me the trees were so silent and so peaceful. And I had this little habit of taking construction paper and string and writing these little prayers and hanging them on the branches of the trees.
Really?
And it was my introduction to silence, I think. I found that the trees, they were accepting of me, and whether I was angry or crying or whatever. and it was a real spiritual thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
What kind of prayers were they?
Oh, I would just use words, like peace or love or kindness, whatever. Or sometimes I would draw a little picture, of a sun and a tree, and And I had been given, when I was 10, I think, I had decided to accept Christ. That was the Baptist way. And you got dunked in the pool, and they gave me a little white Bible that had the Psalms. It was only the Psalms, and the Bible was very small. And I just fell in love with the Psalms. So occasionally I would use a phrase from a Psalm and on my construction paper. And that was my spiritual thing. And then when I was 12, we lived in Oklahoma, and our house was blown away by a tornado while we were in it.
Yeah, I think I remember that from your book.
Yeah, the tornado. And that was a very powerful experience, because I had dreamed for weeks before the tornado happened that there was a foot of water in my bedroom, and that this cotton candy was floating in the water, and my drapes were down in the water as well. And I kept telling my parents of this nightmare. And then the morning after the tornado, when we went back into the house to retrieve whatever we could, there it was. And I said, Mom, that's the cotton candy. She said, honey, that's fiberglass.
Oh, it was the
It
pink insulation.
It stripped the insulation off the walls. I mean, the walls were gone. And so that insulation was floating in the water, and my drapes, and
Wow.
And so I thought, well, I saw this before it happened. What is that?
Mm-hmm.
And my parents were emphatic. What that is nuts. It's nuts. And don't you tell anybody, and don't you ever talk like that again. I mean, that was basically their reaction. Is,
Right.
They didn't understand having inner sight or anything like
Right.
that. So I went through the rest of the years after that, pretty much suppressing that gift. And the next really highly spiritual thing for me was the Vietnam War. Because the year after I graduated from Kent State University was when there was that massacre.
Oh.
And the massacre took place on Blanket Hill, which is where we all hung out, picnics, and, couples would go there, to have time with each other. And to watch the footage of Blanket Hill with students,
Yeah.
I mean, I was deeply affected by that. And I think that was when I decided I wanted to do something to affect change, so that people would have a different way of coming at conflict.
Right.
It just was such a disturbing thing.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't know that Kent State was where you went to school.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah. So then my husband at the time, we were very young, we were only in our 20s, we joined the Ecumenical Institute, which later became the Institute of Cultural Affairs. And they had a global program of, helping people with their awareness. And we were sold on it. I mean, we were going to give our lives to it. And that was pretty much the arrangement. You didn't work unless you worked for the outside to bring money into the organization. And you were part of a community, an intentional community. So we lived in Chicago in a high-rise with hundreds of other families.
Oh, really?
I mean, we were packed into that building. There were probably 300 of us. I don't know, maybe more. Counting children, there were probably 30 or 40 children, including our our first son,
Yeah.
who went there when he was like 3 years old.
Wow.
And so we lived a sort of a monk-like, but it was a family order,
Hmm.
and it was blessed by I'm not gonna get this right. The Council of Churches. I think it was blessed by the Council of Churches at that time.
Good.
And so we were open for global assignment, and the first real assignment out of the country we got was Australia.
Oh, wow.
So that was my second huge spiritual experience, because going away from home so far with a young son, he was only 5 at the time, and being thrown into the outback with Aborigine people, it was a shock to the system.
Yeah.
I didn't know which end was up, and I was expected to, there were high expectations in that organization. You had to pull your weight, and so I was given a program to do with young people, and I was way out of my depth. I was way out of my depth, and this beautiful woman, Margaret, she just set me down and said, look, whatever ideas they gave you about education, I had graduated from Kent State with an education degree.
Right.
Whatever ideas they gave you will not hold water here. These children need to be taught under a tree, because they're not even going to walk in a building with you until they've established that you're trustworthy.
Right.
And so I got to teach under a tree,
In the outback.
in the outback, and in the heat, and the kids played pranks, and that was their way of getting to know if you were a good person or not, if you can handle the pranks. And I guess I did okay. But I fell in love with the depth of that ancient culture. Their eyes were so deep set, and they were such a quiet people. They were more quiet than anything. And people say they're telepathic, and I believe that's true. They seem to read your mind. At least they read your being
Mm-hmm.
at a depth that made me very uncomfortable. But I felt known,
Wow.
Yeah.
So were you just teaching them kind of basic elementary school stuff?
It was more like camp, and so we were teaching them curriculum from the Institute,
Right.
which was cultural curriculum. So we learned about kids in Africa, we learned about kids in China, and so, and I had that curriculum given to me, and I had people helping me because I was young. I was so young.
Right.
But it was great. Yeah.
Well, that's fascinating. Is the institute still around?
It disbanded in I think the early 90s, and it just couldn't sustain the level of projects, and NGOs and other nonprofits in all the countries. We were in every country.
Wow.
Around the globe. They took it up, and they had the curriculum, and some of our staff still go and teach in places like Nepal.
Wow.
I have a friend that teaches in Nepal, and she's older than me. She goes to Nepal. I can't imagine. But
That's
yeah,
great.
but Terry and I had to leave because we had no money, and we were Craig was on his way, and we wanted to have a family, and so we left and came to Oklahoma City because this was home, and established our family here, and we never lost any of the idea of living as a missional family. That was the phrase we used. And so we just continued that, and eventually we got divorced, and I had 10 years as a single mom, raising the boys. And then I had health issues. I was an artist in residence in Oklahoma by that time. I was pretty well booked. I was in the schools teaching poetry and visual art. And I began to have this feeling that I needed more silence. I needed more silence. The schools were noisy. I was working with a Neruda poem called Keeping Quiet. And I was doing that poem, and the kids were writing these silence poems. And then I would leave the building and go into a world that felt way too noisy. And I got physically sick. And we didn't know what was the matter with me. And I was sick for quite a long while. And during that winter that I was so ill, I kept a little book. And it was a little book of insights about life. And I decided I'm 50 years old. And the women in my family live to be 100, so I'm halfway through. Let me take a break. And I really pondered what it would take for me to do that. And I eventually sold my house, and that was money. And then I went to live with my mother in Florida. And they had an emergency medical system there where you could, if you had a residency address, which I did at my mother's, they would give you all the medical care you needed. And so they diagnosed and fixed what was wrong with me, which was a gallbladder.
Oh, wow.
And then I sold the house, and I had money, and I thought, I don't want to go back to work. I want to be in the silence. And so I structured my life to have silence for many months.
Boys gone?
The boys were older by then. Craig was in high school, in his last year of high school. Kirk was already grown and with a gal. And we set it up so that Craig could live right next door to where Kirk was, in his apartment building.
Nice.
So, and his brother had always been more like a dad to him anyway. There's a 7-year age difference. So I felt, sad, but okay to do it that way.
Yeah.
And I spent all that time writing about silence. It was amazing.
And for like a year?
It was about 6 months.
Wow.
And during that time, I finished the manuscript and I sent it to my friend Jack Gillis, who lived in India. So I had to send the manuscript all the way to India. And Jack was going from his home in India to a place he rented in Mexico. And he was stopping in Chicago to see his buddy, David McClaskey. And he left my manuscript with David, even though I told him, don't you share this with anybody, it's too private. He still did it. And the first thing I knew, David started calling me. And he said, what is this silence thing that you're doing, and pretty soon, we were in love, we were completely in love. And he was a man who had spent 7 years in the villages of India. And so silence was appealing to him, and he was a man of silence. And so we got together.
That's great.
And that was the beginning of the Silence Foundation. It started as kind of this magical connection.
Right.
Yeah.
When you were in writing about silence for that 6 months or so, did you take a vow of silence? Were you
I did.
Practicing?
I practiced. My mother insisted on a phone call every Thursday. So I had my Thursday phone call with Mother. But other than that, I was silent. I was even silent when I went shopping. I had a little notepad, and if I had to ask a question, I would write it. I think people thought I was mute, but they didn't know me. I didn't care. I loved being silent. I really loved it. It was life-changing.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So, Where are you now?
Well, I'm back to silence again after many very busy years. I mean, David and I were very busy creating the Silence Foundation and living our dream, you know. We had a lot of opportunity. We had the Community Foundation help us, and we were in their incubator for 4 or 5 years, and they helped us. And then, you know, we finally got all the paperwork in to be an official nonprofit in April of '08, and David died in August of '08.
Wow.
So that set me back a bit. You know, the grieving process took quite a while, and I didn't know how I would do what we were doing without David. And it took a while, but eventually I returned to education. Like my artist in residency connections were there always, they never left. And I thought, well, if I can do that work with the emphasis on silence, then I can be happy, you know, I can make that work. And the collaborations just came right easy from that, you know.
Yeah.
Kathy O'Connor had teen girls, teen mothers, we did that. Carrie remembers the tea party. That was a fabulous time. And we got grants and we got attention from the media. And we were really rolling, you know, so that was a very, very busy time. And then I had 2 strokes in the same year, and we started looking at getting further grants, and the agencies wanted proof of the success of what we were doing, and we didn't know how to prove it. How do you prove something that's so of the heart, you know? And Kathy and I talked and decided we didn't want to continue in that vein. And David was gone. And so those years, you know, were kind of finding the way.
Yeah.
And luckily we had already been doing annual retreats with Larry and Peggy. So we're able to continue the retreats, and then, you know, having people come on board like you guys who helped us find direction. I think we weathered it beautifully. Even COVID, I think we weathered COVID very beautifully. We were doing resilience, and at least we did a whole bunch of resilience, and then we did Cassidy School and Westminster, which are private schools, and that was beautiful. But where I am now is letting it go, which is the right place for a 79-year-old person. You know, I'm going to be 80 years old. I'm not the right guardian of the future of this anymore. I can guard the past, but I can't really speak to the future, because all the things, the ideas that are generated, I can't see my body, you know, doing any of those ideas.
Yeah.
And so it's good to let go. And with the ailment that I have to have a lot of quiet. It's just required. And I think, you know, life is laughing at me a little bit. Just like all this talk of quiet, and you were one of the busiest people, you know, moving all the time and talking all the time. And your real soul wants quiet. So I'm back to quiet.
I love it.
Pat, I have a question. How did you get introduced to Thich Nhat Hanh and that journey in Larry and Peggy?
Oh, that's a great question. David had been very close with Larry because both of them were in India. Larry was in Calcutta and David was in the villages. And they had a strong bond after the Ecumenical Institute and the Order of the Institute of Cultural Affairs disbanded. Then David and Larry got real involved with Gene Houston. And so they went to Gene Houston workshops, and they were tight. And so when we started to build a mission statement for the Silence Foundation, David said, we better get a hold of Larry because he's made this connection with Thich Nhat Hanh. And I think the East is where the silence wisdom is going to come from, not the Western people so much. And so we started making little trips out to see Larry and Peggy, to California, and wherever they were, we would go and visit with them. And then Larry said, you have to come to a retreat. So we did our first retreat in the year 2000.
With?
Thich Nhat Hanh and Larry and Peggy and about 700 other people.
And where was that?
That was in San Diego.
Oh,
Wow.
nice.
Yeah, it was indescribable experience of meeting someone who you knew was your teacher, who would be your teacher for the rest of your life. No matter how long they lived, they would be your teacher. And we just fell in love with the idea of regular meditation gatherings, regular retreats, having a sangha. We created Prairie Wind Sangha.
After your retreat with Larry and Peggy in San Diego, and then brought it here to Oklahoma City and created Prairie Wind Song with Maurice. Was he around?
He didn't come in till 2005.
He was.
So he was several years before he came. But when he came, then he was so passionate. And when David was dying, he asked me to have Maurice come to the house. And the next thing I knew, he calls me into the bedroom and he says, I've given the Sangha to Maurice. And I was like, what? But he said, Patricia, you're going to have other things on your mind. And he knew that we needed somebody who was steady for the long haul, and that was Maurice. And he's still running it.
Yeah, it was a good choice.
It was a really, really good choice.
Wow.
We're going on almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, 20.
Yeah.
Almost 21.
Yeah.
And how did Helen come in?
Oh, Helen was our very first president of our board of the Silence Foundation.
When you became a nonprofit?
When we became a nonprofit, and Helen had arranged for David and I to work at St. Francis of the Woods as interim directors while they were finding a director. So we were, and she was on the board there. So we knew Helen very well, and we really valued her. Helen is the kind of person that blesses everybody all the time.
Yeah,
She
I can attest to that.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's just her gift.
it is.
Yeah. So I had, in addition to Helen, I had Joyce Marshall and Ann Clement were my other two guardian angels in a way, especially after David died. And these three women are all in their 90s now. And I hope when you do your interviews that there will be a chance to interview all three of them, because every one of them, powerhouse woman with great gifts.
Yeah. We just added them to the list.
Okay. Yay.
So I think that one of the questions I had was, we've been talking a lot about silence. My original question was, what is it to you? What does it mean to you? But also, has it changed for you from your time in the outback in Australia and teaching the little kids under a tree up until now, or has it stayed the same?
It's changed, of course. I believe in that things evolve, and we evolve. But the phrase I started with, pretty early on is that we come from a great silence, and we will return to that great silence. And in this tiny little interval we call life, silence wants to be our companion. It wants to walk with us. It's the key to our beingness, our presence. The amount of silence that you're friends with, that you're close, cozy with, contributes to your presence. And it's a powerful thing because it's made of nothing, which is everything. So it's very mystical and hard to talk about.
Right.
But that's what it means to me. It's companionship on the highest spiritual level.
Wow. That's a great way to put it.
And it unlocks our awareness. Because when you're not distracted by all the noise and all the movement, and you can be really still, then you realize you are your consciousness. You are your awareness. And that's not just the head, it's the heart. It's the whole intelligence of the human being.
You'll love it.
I do want to say that community is everything. For the Silence Foundation, what we will do, and I was so delighted when Carrie mentioned healing, creating, and connecting. Those three, that's it. And if you just follow that, you're gonna do what you need to do in the world. Because you draw to you people, wonderful people, who care about those same things, and you can, in the silence and in quiet conversation, you can build from there. And it's beautiful what you get to build.
Yeah. Okay, I have one other question, and it just came to me just now. And that is, and I don't know if there is an answer to this question, so forgive me. And how do we bring the message of silence to the people who are in the middle of the noise?
That's a very good question, and I do want to answer that question because my own depth journey with silence started with suffering. I believe suffering is the key. When a person suffers, they seek answers. And when they're seeking answers, they are open very often to things that they weren't open to before. And that openness, those open people are the people that will be drawn to the work. And so if they're too caught up in the noise, they won't be drawn to the work. They might dip their toe in, but they won't be drawn to the work. But if they're really suffering and they're really seeking an answer, they're seeking inner peace, or they're seeking a way to change the world, or their own thinking, or whatever, then they're open. And then you've got great possibilities. Can go ahead if you have.
No, go ahead.
I want, while we have video, I want to show two things.
Oh, good.
Because, in addition to the working with individuals, we've published two things. This is more recent. This was published in 2020, right in the aftermath of COVID. And this is about an individual journey, my journey with silence. And this was published in 2005. And this was the first major project we ever did, was the creation of this book with the exercises of the other world. And we taught it at Oklahoma City University. And we feel like this book has got a real future. We don't know how it's going to look yet, but this has got the exercises of how to be in this world and know there's another world too
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, both worlds exist simultaneously.
Yeah.
And poetry and writing is
Right.
the way through to get the worlds to talk to one another.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, for mentioning that. Yeah, I'm deep into that one at the moment.
Oh,
actually.
good.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, playing around